Hey everybody, welcome to another World of Warships replay in the Gomiyashi. In this match we are on the, I think this is called Big Race, and I just accidentally tabbed out of the game. Yes it is. This map tends to only pop in lower tiers. I don't think I've seen it in anything above a tier 5. And as a destroyer captain, I usually prefer to head towards the south and play around in that cluster of islands down in the little bay there. Tends to be where most of the destroyers go. The north and centre are a bit too open for them, so they play around down the islands there. 2 destroyers enter, 1 destroyer leaves, typically. So we'll see if we can knock out most of the enemy's destroyer force in that area and then move on to deal with the rest of their team. I've got a Clemson and a Minakaze coming with me, so we got some pretty good firepower down here. Clemson having decent gunnery and good torpedo broadsides on both sides, and the Minakaze is just extremely fast and maneuverable. Already we've spotted an enemy Nicholas, that's the tier 5 American destroyer. Like the Clemson, with torpedo tubes on both sides of the ship, so very good at close range sort of dogfights, not very good at long range because the torps are only very short range torpedoes, I think about 4.5 kilometers, similar to the Clemson. I don't think the Americans get long range torpedoes until tier 8 or 9, actually it's probably tier 9, so they rely very heavily on their guns at lower tiers and ambush tactics. Probing for shots on these guys. The islands are making it a little bit difficult to try and get hits into them at the moment. Partly because they're going behind islands, partly because I'm going behind islands. It's just a bit of a clusterfuck. Minakaze and our own Clemson are in a much better position to deal with them. And we've got another Minakaze here as well now. Looks like the Wix has run himself aground. And here comes an enemy Gomiyashi. And he's actually a serious threat because the Grim does have very, very good guns. They don't traverse very quickly, but they are the most powerful guns on any destroyer that I'm aware of in the game. Not the fastest firing, but 130mm, they're quite big, and they have quite good range and shell velocity. They're more like cruiser guns than destroyer guns. Still firing HE at the moment. Really, I probably could have switched to AP at this point and finished him a lot quicker, but as you can see here, he's not going anywhere in a hurry, and he's also on fire, so not really any pressure to finish him in a hurry. And here an enemy Clemson's coming around. I decide to fire off some torpedoes at this guy, not noticing my teammates already got him handled. And then there's an Omaha coming. Now, I can deal with the Clemson in a minute, he's about to run himself aground, so I fire torps at the Omaha. Those were actually aimed, again, the replay didn't show it. And I get a good AP salvo straight through his front, which goes straight to his citadel. If you have an end-on shot down a destroyer or cruiser, you can typically fuck them up with 1 or 2 salvos of AP, because they just don't have the armor. I actually get the enemy Omaha to team kill the Clemson. He was firing at me and hit his teammate instead. So although it deprived me of a kill there, I'm certainly not going to complain. And there is the Omaha Citadel, just behind the rearmost funnel. Basically, if you can hit those things just on or below the waterline, and underneath the funnels, you're pretty much guaranteed to get Citadel hits, much the same with the low-tier Japanese cruisers, like the Chuikuma, Tatsuda, and the Kuma, as well as the Iwaki. As I think I've said before, Citadels, generally if you aim beneath turrets or smokestacks, obviously accounting for lead, you're generally going to hit them, especially if your shots land near or just under the waterline. So you want your shells to be arcing in. If you're just shooting flat at them from directly beside them, you're probably not going to do anything. Most of the machinery is either at or just below the waterline on pretty much every class of ships, but especially the battleships. which have a lot of underwater stuff. Big technical terms being used here, underwater stuff. So we found their carriers already, and you can see this is the general response of carriers to being found by destroyers. Instead of using their torpedo bombers on things they actually have a hope in hell of hitting, they start torping at destroyers. Not a wise idea, especially at a Gurimuyoshi and a Minakaze, which are two of the fastest, most agile destroyers in the game. At this point I need to make a correction. In one of my previous videos I said the Gurimuyoshi was about as fast as a Minakaze and had a top speed of 39 knots. I'm actually wrong. It's 38 point something. Ooh, 1 knot difference. It is still one of the fastest ships in the game, but not by quite as big a margin. So here we've got a choice between shooting the Langley and the Independence. The Langley is presenting an easier target at the moment, so I just go for him, and we can deal with the Independence later. Both of them are bringing their aircraft back to rearm. Oh, sorry, no they're not. One of them's bringing his aircraft back to rearm, and one of them's putting them out. So it looks like a bunch of torpedo bombers going for the Minakaze, and a bunch of dive bombers coming for me. The Langley goes down, and actually no, I was right the first time. These guys appear to have... No, I'm not. What are these carriers doing? Okay, sorry. I'm not used to seeing carrier drivers fly their planes around in circles like that for so long before ditching their ordnance. I would have expected them to come straight at me. I guess he's just biding his time, maybe. But either way, now they are rearming. Sometimes when carriers know they're in trouble, they'll get their aircraft to do dry runs on you to try and scare you away. It generally doesn't work if you've been paying any attention at all to what's going on in the battle, as I just demonstrated I wasn't. But I suppose it can be an effective tactic sometimes, like it was at the Battle of Samar, where the American aircraft made dry runs, depth charging runs, torpedo runs, bomb runs, runs with 38 caliber service revolvers, and all manner of other things to try and scare the shit out of the Japanese, and it actually fucking worked. With both carriers sunk, the enemy planes now have absolutely nothing they can do except kind of circle around uselessly and give me kills. I could just drive around beneath them with my AA turned on. Instead, I decide to kind of weave around, but generally head towards the center of the map where the last enemy battleship is. Now, we haven't spotted the destroyer at this point. I assumed it was because he'd run off to the northeast corner and was trying to do some sneaky shit to get around behind our carriers. I was actually wrong. I may as well say it now. It turns out this guy was AFK, and he was in fact sitting in about G10-ish, but myself and the Minakaze never saw him. We got just close enough that we nearly spotted him, but then we turned towards the center of the map, and he managed to avoid being seen. And so, while we were off on a wild goose chase up in the northeast corner of the map, he got spotted by one of our carrier's aircraft in spawn, sitting there doing nothing. Now at this point, it looks like our team has mostly handled the enemy Kongo. He's not going to last very much longer at all, but I decide I'd like to see if I can get some shots in anyway. Had a pretty decent match so far, as has our little Minakaze in front of me. We're the only 2 surviving destroyers. The other 3 were killed at some point earlier in the match. I'd imagine we probably lost at least one of them in that wild destroyer melee up in the, or down in the southwest corner. Kongo crosses into my gun range and pulls out from behind an island, so I begin blasting shots at him. And I'm not likely to be able to do a huge amount of damage to him, especially from this distance with destroyer guns. So I switch to AP and see if I can set him on fire, which I actually do. He's so low on health that just sustained low damage hits from my guns will eventually kill him, and so I continue firing. Now if I was a little closer and I had a better angle on him, I would actually be able to do pretty decent damage to him with AP. About 1,500–2,000 damage per broadside, I'd imagine, but from this range you're looking at much lower damage values, just because of the angles involved. So this is where I start heading up to the northeast corner. There's going to be quite a few minutes of absolutely nothing at all happening here, so I'm going to take the opportunity to talk a bit. I may as well talk about the Guryamayoshi and whether it's worth picking up or not, since you've still got quite a while to pick it up as part of the pre-order pack. As far as I'm aware, I don't know when open beta's coming, but I assume it's not for a little while. It's very fast and quite maneuverable, even by destroyer standards, which is automatically a good mark for it. Its guns are very slow traversing, which means in a sort of wild destroyer melee like we saw in the southwest corner of this map, you're going to be at a disadvantage, because the US destroyers will just rip you to shreds while you're still waiting for your guns to traverse, so you have to pre-aim your guns off to whichever side you expect the enemy to come out on. With that said, once you do have the guns on somebody, they are going to do a lot of damage. A lot more damage than any other tier 5 destroyer. You also have very good torpedoes for this tier. Now, their range is 8 kilometers, which I think is about the same as the Minakaze gets, so they're about on par with the Japanese torpedoes at this tier. They're not the fastest in the world, but their range, coupled with the fact that you don't get spotted until you're about 7 kilometers away, it means that you can use this thing for very nice little hit-and-run attacks, where you come within, say, 7.5 kilometers of the enemy, drop off a full spread of torpedoes, and then just turn and run. You don't even need to use your smoke, they're not going to see you unless you fire your guns. So that makes it quite a good ambush destroyer. It also makes it quite good at sort of standoff engagements, because it does have the range on the guns and the torpedoes to be effective at distances other destroyers would not be at this tier. I should clarify. Its anti-aircraft armament isn't too bad. It's not great, but really, I mean, at this tier, none of the destroyers are. And I should also point out that you may have noticed it when I zoomed in on my ship earlier, but the anti-aircraft armament now does rotate to face whatever it's shooting at. So it is animated, not fully, but the turrets point in the right direction at least. So here's the last guy. I just begin wailing on him with AP, while the Minakaze fires off his torps, as does our carrier. Hope for the last shot, but the torps are going to get there first.